Hey guys, it's Kelsey here. Quick little thing before we start the episode. We're going to be dealing with some heavy topics in this episode, things to do with sexual assault and rape and miscarriages. So if any of those things trigger you or make you feel uncomfortable, then feel free to not listen to the podcast. And we completely understand, and we want you guys to make this your safe, happy, gentleman jack environment. So we're just going to give you that little warning before we start this week's episode. Bye.
Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of Jack the Last Podcast, where we break down HBO BBC's Gentleman Jack and generally have a gay old time. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Kelsey. Welcome to episode 4.
Things
are gonna get a little dark.
A little? Real dark. So what are we starting with today, Kelsey?
So I was on Twitter on yesterday, and I saw a tweet by @Liz_Nandez that said, I guess Ann Walker's weak spine doesn't involve being grumbled by her wife, and I think it's accurate. And this is, she screenshotted a post by Yes, I'm a Bit Odd on Tumblr. It's a diary entry from Ann Lister's journal. It says, Thursday the 23rd of January, 1834. And we went to her room, and she sat on my knee with her head on the bed and her feet on a chair while I grumbled her pretty well.
What?
And somebody's like, Miss Ann, I have a weak spine walker doing some acrobatics. You know, the whole bit this season that she has a weak spine. And she's like, also, everybody on Twitter was like,
wait.
What? How does this work?
How is this? This is like a Rocky Flintstone-esque, like, description of a physical act. For those of you, if any of you are familiar with the My Dad Wrote a Porno podcast, where this guy reads his 60-year-old retiree's dad attempt to write a version of, as he called it, 50 Colors of Grey. And a lot of it involves this woman who's a lesbian question. They like call her, she's hashtag, like, the name of the books are called Belinda Blinked, and they're under business leadership and lesbian erotica. But she's truly like a pansexual, like everyone who is attracted to her, and she's attracted to them, and it is wonderful and great. But the thing that makes this book so remarkable is that this woman is described as doing positions that are not doable within the laws of physics as we know them, or the human anatomy. And that is what I feel like I just read here. Like, she's sat on my knee with her head on the bed and her feet on a chair. What is that describing?
So I thought about this a lot.
I'm sure you did.
I think if she's sitting sideways, but I think Ann Lister has to be in the chair, first of all.
No, Ann has to be on the bed for her head to be on the bed, right? Okay, how many chairs do we think are in this scene? 1 or 2?
I definitely think I think there has to be 2. Because what I'm thinking is happening is, okay. You know, like you put a kid over your knee and you spank them or whatever, like, you know, old school.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically, Ann Walker's on her knee, like her butt's on her knee. She's leaned back on the bed, and then her foot's like up on a chair. And then Ann Lister, like, this is her. She's laying like this. Ann Walker's perpendicular to her, and she enters her perpendicularly. It's weird. Like, there's 10 times 10. Like,
what in the Cirque du Soleil is this supposed to be? Like, no. This is not a position anyone would want to do or is physically able to do. I call BS on this. I mean, nothing about this makes any sense.
Everybody on Twitter was like, well, I guess she really didn't have that weak of a spine.
Which, look, this woman, maybe she has a spine of, like, Mr. Fantastic and is just, like, there's no way. Okay, here's my thing. If any of y'all are out there, are artistically gifted, Belinda Blink style, draw us the position that you think this is. But in a fun, cartoony way, nothing like vulgar. Yeah, hashtag Jack the Last Pod.
Jack the Last Pod, and we'll repost the best one.
What was the one that like is the most hilarious to us?
Oh yeah, for sure. But everybody on Twitter was like, and Jim and Jack Twitter was like their minds were nobody could figure it out. Analyst must just be like a next like lesbian sex level a million to figure some of this stuff out.
Or a Cirque du Soleil performer. There's no in between. Like, come on. This is either. You know what? I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to. what I'm supposed to be picturing right now. It's crazy. Oh, the meme under it is Ann Lister looking confused and doing that like the trigonometry shapes of like the mental math. Oh, it's so good. You know what? That's really good. Speaking of uncomfortable positions, we open episode 4 with messy cousin Priestley, who is shook after walking in on the Lesbianns. She didn't knock, so that's mostly on her. She's mad she defended Ann Lister for so long from like the rumors that turned out to be very true about like, you know, what she gets up to with women, this and that. Her husband is the one who is actually related to Ann Walker, is the thing that was made clear on like a rewatch of this episode. And basically he's like, you can't repeat what you think you saw, whatever, to anyone, because Ann Lister is so like, you know, she's been around here so long, she's so good at this game, she will manipulate it and kind of gaslight her. And he's kind of right, because this is exactly her MO of like, she will be so pleasant and so respectful and so upright that like it'll just make you look crazy and it'll make us both look crazy and it won't be great for either of us. And messy cousin Priestley is like, oh, so I've 110% already gossiped about this with this cousin, this cousin, this cousin, this other woman at the market, this one and that one, the whole family, basically. Which I was like, whoop, this is what we're starting from. And then I think we cut to title sequence shortly thereafter.
This scene I was watching last night and I was getting like heated all over again, because something like this very similar happened to me during my coming out process.
Oh no,
like,
what?
Bodies. Yeah, so basically there's this girl, whatever, told her I liked her. Her parents were really conservative. She like freaked out and told them. And then like her mom came to my house the next day. It was like really traumatizing. It's like legitimately traumatizing. But it's acted all nice and sweet and everything. But then I found out later, like the next year, this is my junior year of high school, my senior year of high school, one of my friends, because I came out senior year officially, and I had no issue. Everybody was really accepting. Like it was a non-issue at all, especially being in North Carolina. That was really, you know, special. So like some of my friends were like, yeah, that girl that I told the girl that I told I liked her, whatever, the year before, was like trying to tell people that I was gay and like spread bad things about me. And then her mom, who was like this Christian, like perfect person, tried to get my friends, who I was our mutual friends, to not be friends with me anymore because I was like gay.
What the heck? Oh yeah, we don't. I forgot that we don't say the F word on this podcast. We say the other words, but not that one. Whoa, I'm so sorry. That's like, that is. So wait, she came over to your house. Were you out to your mom and everyone?
No, I just told my mom I was having like an attachment issue with this girl. Like I didn't come out then, but I just like made up a bunch of stuff to like get me out of hot
I feel
water.
like your mom definitely like put 2 and 2 together in that moment. You say I have an attachment issue with this girl.
I didn't come out for another year, and it wasn't like a good coming out process with my family, with my mom at first. It's fine now. But anyway, that wasn't the issue. It was this lady that was like being like fake nice. Hashtag fake ally, like Eliza Priestley.
No, I was
so like Eliza
Priestley would not call herself an ally, I think, to any stretch of the imagination.
No, like she was like an Ann Lister supporter, and then all of a sudden when she figures out the truth, because they all knew that I was like a little strange, because it was like a group of like Christian kids, and like I was always real tomboyish. Everybody knew it was a little strange, but I never, knew anything. When this came out, yeah, she's a real piece of work. I don't have any good things to say about her.
There's a reason why GCB exists as an acronym, Good Christian Bitches, which is a very short-lived show on ABC starring Kristen Chenoweth, I think. But it was, I'm 99% sure. I think it had like 6 episodes. But no, that is a very specific type of person that 100% messy cousin Priestley is. Someone who's it's like I'm so concerned in their well-being, but this is 100% her being an asshole.
Mhm. No, I was like this. She reminds me just of that girl's mother, like a lot, and that girl
I'm
too.
sorry.
It was like years ago. I'm like over. I really don't care, but
no, that's
it just
traumatic as hell.
reminded me.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad that you've moved past and grown from it. But like, ooh, you never told me this story before. This is awful and like not okay. Yeah.
Eliza Priestley reminds me of like Southern Church busybodies that are like nice to your face, but then say stuff behind your back.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like Eliza Priestley is not nice to their face, as you see later on in the episode, but it's just like she is like that stereotype, like in this show.
She's a GCB, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my personal story for the episode.
Oof.
But we get to then we go with Mrs. Ann Walker that we learned that's Mrs. Ann Walker from episode 1. Aunt Ann without a E. And then she's with the Priestleys, and like Aunt Ann like doesn't approve, but she also knows. I can never figure out how she feels. I think she like is like bothered by it, but is also like old and doesn't care. Like, you know what I mean?
But also their concern is that she's seducing her for her fortune and kind of wielding undue control. Like I think they're ultimately worried to a certain degree about Ann Walker being controlled by Ann Lister.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, she's under, in like the turn of phrase they use quite a bit throughout the show is like under her influence. So I think, they're worried, and they've always worried about fortune hunters for her. And this is a thing that they understand even less than a young man on the come up,
Yeah, I read this is more pure homophobia than anything.
No, I think that is like 90% of it, but I think 10% of it is also what is the motivation here? She's corrupting her to an end to control her in her fortune.
That's true.
I think you're right.
I love this analogy that gets used a few times this episode. She'll have her in Paris very soon, which is like, it's almost like innuendo for like
the city of like a den of sin, a salacious
because they do go to Paris for their honeymoon. That Paris is part of the places they travel, and that's what she was with Maria Barlow, where she lived like pretty openly in Paris. So I just love that Paris is an innuendo for it. Sorry, I like that Paris is an innuendo for like full lesbianism.
You're like queerness, yes.
Yeah.
Going to Paris. I love that. But also a thing that they are worried about is like, oh, they're taking her to a new doctor. And that doctor turns out to be Dr. Belcombe, who we know as Mariana's brother. And the whole Walker clan does not love it, although she clearly is like looking happier and has more color in her face than when we first see her. She's
color in her face because of sex stuff in this next scene. Is that a good segue?
No, because I was actually going to talk about mental illness really fast. Like what he talks about. We'll get there. Basically, they are seeing Dr. Belcombe, and Lister has a moment with Dr. Belcombe, and he's like, I diagnosed her with nervous hysteria. And that was a moment where I was like, oh, of course you do. A woman is not doing what she wanted to do. She has some iteration of hysteria. But it really was at this time, and I believe we talk about this a bit in episode 1, it is a thing that is it is actually meant to be a catch-all for a number of mental illnesses where it's like, yes, we labeled women this when they were like insubordinate and like, maybe just bitchy, whatever it was, but also like actual like anxiety, depression, and things like that were kind of caught in this catch-all. But what he does say, he does make a very progressive point in for his time, and I feel like this might have been something that Sally Wainwright like kind of wrote into the show. You know what I mean? It like made this character a mouthpiece for something a little more meaningful that whether he would have believed it or not, something that's progressive. The idea is like the idea of treating mental illness with the gravitas of a physical ailment.
Steph seems pretty woke because he's like obviously has full knowledge of her and Mariana's relationship, and he's like chill with it.
Yeah, in the show, but I'm just like in terms of
Yeah.
in terms of the historical timeline, I have no idea what his stance on these things were.
Well, I think in real life he knew, and I know that
Oh, he
him and
must have
Analyst were
known.
friends.
Yes, yes,
He
yes.
knew, yeah. So he seemed like pretty woke, like, and she really did get treated by Dr. Belcombe several times. So when she went
Yeah.
to the asylum, there's a
Ann
part where
Walker.
she comes. What really? Yeah, Ann Walker did go to asylum when she came back to Halifax after Scotland. They just took that out of the show, and she went to York and was under Dr. Belcombe's care for like a little bit. Which they kind of cut out of the show, but that's true. That happened in real life.
Yeah,
Also,
they skipped that.
Side note: Steph Belcombe, his sideburns are like it's like mutton chop sideburns, fresh, clean, great work.
Yeah, well done. To that wig person, because I'm fairly sure this man did not grow them himself for them to come out of that even in that like spectacular.
No, I read a thing that that all the facial hair on the show was pretty much like
prosthetic
put on.
Yeah, no, that's the only way you get like really good sideburns in like film and TV. Like they are hair pieces. But I was like, yeah, but also his prescription is he says something like to the effect of you know, you're a good influence on her, you know, keep it up. And I'm just like, your prescription is just homosexuality. And I'm kind of here for that. I'm like, 5 stars on ZocDoc. I will say my mental health got better once I leaned into my queerness. So
well, and also too, I mean, honestly, what was the number one cure for nervous hysteria was like orgasms. That's what she's been having plenty of. So she's probably like, that's why she's so, and touched from that scene before, which is supposed to be again a lot raunchier in script than it was in show. Like they're supposed to be like super sweaty and like, in the script it says like their nightgowns are like soaked through with sweat, and you can tell they've been added on.
I will say that's a thing that you write and that sounds good on the page, but like if you were to see that, you'd be like, ooh, okay. You know, it takes away some of the like fantasy and the, you know, the romanticism of like the scene and the lighting and stuff to see someone who's just sweaty. Like it's like that's a thing. That's a romance like novel thing that would not translate visually.
And I love her checking her. I just love that scene because it's so cute. You can't tell that they've been like that's all they've been doing.
They've been flirting.
Like, the last episode. Yeah, they've been more than flirts. That's all they've been doing since the end of the last.
No. But it's of course, but it's very like playful and it's not, you know, treated.
I wrote in my notes like I want more of that in season 2, like early morning Anns, like after a night of, you know what, or just
being
more
together,
like waking up happy in the morning. Yeah, more
no,
like the domestic
it's very sweet.
Stuff we didn't see a lot of. I love that little scene though; it's cute. And then when like Ann like takes her watch and stuff, it's just like a really cute moment.
Oh, I loved it. Then at one point we cut away to a letter that Ann Lister sent to Mariana, and Mr. Mariana, his name does not matter to me.
Charles Lawton.
Yeah, sure. And she learns of Ann Walker's existence, and Mr. Mariana says, is there no end to Miss Lister's selflessness? And it's just so dry and so full of hate and like annoyance, but also resignation. I love it.
Yeah, he knows full well what they do.
Oh, totally.
He's like fine with her, like sleeping with her. But there's a good line in the script after she reads the letter. It's like Mariana realizes that Ann Lister's only like that selfless when she's in love. So like Mariana's like, oh, I'm being like replaced, kind of. We go to the next scene, which is the carriage. They get in the carriage and her like questioning that guy about the carriage, the gig thing.
Who's the opposite of, not to date this podcast, but 100% this will date this podcast, who's doing a reverse Tekashi 6ix9ine and not giving up nothing. She was like, oh, you know, that person you thought you saw. I was like, my cousins work for Mr. Rawson. I am not 100% sure of what I saw, you know, and I will not be saying anything, testifying one way or another about who knows if I saw. What is seeing anyway? What does it really mean to see? Yeah, he is not no snitch. I'm like, he is 100% taking a reverse Tekashi 6ix9ine stance. And I was like, I respected it. You know, like honestly, as someone who not respecting it, but in the sense of like, I got it. Like he is in such a vulnerable place. You know, he might be the best situated as compared to the rest of his family, but the rest of his family, like working for the Rawsons, that is not a good person to work for. You know, as like rude as Anne can be to her servants, how great of a boss do you think Christopher Rawson is? You know, how generous, how forgiving do you think that man is? Not at all. So I'm like, this guy was not about to upset his bag, upset his family's bag. Which leaves Anne in a very frustrating place. But as we see later, she does actually get more answers than she expected.
And then Anne Walker comes out in that amazing dress. I love that red dress. It's so good. When she walks out to the carriage and Anne is so good. That leads me into the deleted scene of the episode. When I read you this scene, you're going to be really mad they cut it.
Go for it. Go for it.
It's in Anne Choma's book that this happened in the carriage, which you probably get from leading into. But it's just so the writing is chef's kiss. So it's a little long, but I'm going to read it because it's just you have to hear it. Exterior, interior, Anne Walker's carriage. Anne and Anne sit side by side eating orange segments, both thoroughly engrossed in one another's company. Anne Lister, when we get back, we'll get the maps out and plan the route thoroughly. We'll be in Rome for Easter, and by June we can be back and in Scotland with your sister and the children. Anne slips into voiceover as they gaze at one another. Surely she cannot go on with me as she does and mean to say no on the 3rd of April. Then back to speech. And I've been thinking about when we come back to settle. Crowness is very elegant and stylish, of course, but there have been Listers at Shibden for 15 generations and between 2 and 3 centuries. For me, it'd mean so much if you'd come and live with me at Shibden. Anne Walker, what about your aunt and your father and your sister? Anne Lister, they'll be delighted. And look, you'd have more independence there with me from the tribe, and dare I say more eclat. Socially, we'd have our own wing in the upstairs, and I think we could be really very cozy and very happy there together. They're gazing at one another. Anne Walker remains starstruck, gazing into Anne Lister's brilliantly intelligent face. They melt into a lovely orange-flavored sticky kiss. It becomes more passionate. The picnic lunch is abandoned. Eventually they come up for air. Anne Walker, who taught you to kiss like that if you never did anything like this before? She doesn't say it like it's a deal breaker. It's just out of interest, really. But it takes Anne Lister slightly unawares. After a slight hesitation. Anne Lister, nature. Voiceover. It struck me that I might ask her the same thing. Then out loud, I did wonder, Anne Walker, what? Anne Lister, if you'd ever, a suggestive whisper, played tricks with another. Anne Walker, who? Anne Lister, Catherine Rawson. Anne Walker bursts out laughing. Good Lord, no. Catherine's very... What's the word? Anne pulls a menacing little face. Anne Lister, what? Uptight, straight-laced, boring? They're both not in agreement. And then they both laugh and melt into another smooch. And this in turn leads to Anne Lister's hand heading north up inside Miss Walker's thick knitted drawers again. Anne Lister continued to murmur between kisses. I think we should pop in at Cliff Hill and have a look at your Aunt Walker on our way back to Crow's Nest, just to normalize things. End scene.
What the hell? Why were we not given this? I wish there was a way to record the face I had the entire time when Kelsey was reading that. Say what?
I saw like the end when I clicked back over to the screen off the script. It was just like
I'm so, because I did know there was mention on another wonderful Gentleman Jack podcast, Shibden After Dark. They did mention there was like an orange scene where it was like them kind of making some plans, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool, but I did not know the extent of detail, and I'm so livid because it's so sweet and it's so but also, first of all, dressed as they are in these elaborate fabrics, how are you eating oranges with dignity in a moving cart is my question. I cannot eat an orange with dignity sitting on like flat earth, but shout out to that. Two, which is also what a very like sensual stage business to give these women, to give the like, because it's like, oh, it's like this very like juicy, tender fruit. And then they're also, and it's also like forbidden fruit, like so many layers there. But then also, it's like a very good expository scene to explain, like, oh, but also, okay, here's a point I will make: is more scenes of Anne lying that this is her first girlfriend. I'm like, yeah. Anne Walker, sweetie, you must know she's lying to you. You are letting this woman lie to you because there's no way.
Well, she did. She was like, And Ann Lister in the scene got freaked, like, oh crap, she thinks I've been with other women, and she's like, no, but then in the script is saying, you know, Ann Walker's not suspecting anything. She's just making like playful chat, like, where did you learn to kiss so good? Type
Ann
thing.
Lister's such a player. Ugh.
Also, the line "orange flavored sticky kiss," best action dialogue I've ever read.
Oh, that's so cute. I'm mad. I wish I would have, like, I would just like to see how these actors play that too, because I feel like that would just be so charming. Um, ugh, yeah, you're right. I am mad that this was not shot. Speaking of what are the opposite of a scene that I like, why couldn't we swap out the next scene with that? Which our next scene is people, not even necessarily people, just Mama Souden is talking to Lil Souden about Bad Dad Souden. And like, oh, where'd he go? And Lil Souden's like, who cares? He's gone. He's out of her life. He went to America. He always talked about it. And she's like, when did he talk about that? I was like, I don't know. At times, I guess. I don't know. So this is where we get the beginning of this lie. She clearly does not even suspect what has happened to her husband. But yeah, so that's where that storyline ends for now. He's like whittling in a very serial killery kind of way by a fire, but whatever. Who cares?
I wrote down that like I like Thomas, but he needs like a better like cover story. It's like real bad.
He didn't even think about like if you're gonna I get the murder wasn't super premeditated. Like it might have been like, oh, I may have to kill him, but he didn't truly think it through. But how at the barest minimum you don't have a lie prepared, but also even to clue in your mom on it at this point. Like first long run, like she is ultimately clued in, but they don't take the time to develop one cohesive lie. And there are multiple times throughout the series that they like give the game away. And I'm like, why? You had one task. Literally, again, this is the thing we talk about like every episode, how easy it is to get away with murder in this time period. You just have to do the bare minimum of a lie. Not even a good lie, just a lie that can't necessarily be disproven. You know what I mean? So I'm just like, literally, that's all you had to do. And they did not take any time to come up with a decent lie. Anyway, so yeah, then we jump back to the Lesbianns. Ann Walker is stoked to travel with Ann Lister. And she's talking about this with, I don't know, one of them relatives. I don't know.
Ann Walker.
I thought it was Aunt Ann. Oh, she's like, oh, we're going abroad. We're going to this place for Easter and we're going that place for Christmas. And then everyone's like, you know, your brother died abroad. I'm like, all right, Debbie Downer, let's dial it back.
And then she's like, Miss Lister, it seems like you have my niece quite under your spell. Mm-hmm. And then Anne, she turns around. She's like, no, I quite think she has me under hers.
Oh, which is so cute. Again, too smooth.
The ability for her to turn a conversation around in her favor is like masterful. She's so good at turning everything in her favor.
Everyone in her life is very lucky she was not a sociopath. Like her ambitions were so small. If she was like out here like trying to like ruin stuff, she very easily could because she's like charming and a sweet. Look, let me tell you, she could work in PR. Let me say that. She'd be great at it.
Sounds like a good alternative universe fan fiction. Analyst, PR agent.
I did read one where she was like some high-powered corporate lady, and Ann Walker ran a cafe, like a bakery, and Ann Lister would just come every day and to like get sweet baked treats, and she just falls for this like baker woman. It was very cute. I should finish that, by the way. That was really good. I'll shout out in a later date the name of this fanfic because it was very sweet and very beautifully written. Anyway, we get to Marion and Auntie Anne and Papa Lister sitting around the fire. And Auntie Anne is like, I did accidentally mention that you have an interest in Mr. Abbott while you were away. And she's like, no, Anna's going to give me so much like BS about that. And it's like, and they're like, well, to be fair, is he a good match for you? He does make carpets. And she's like, he's a major member of like a local, like of a bank, of like the big local bank. And the dad, you know, Papa Lister points out, it's like, we all come from trade, like a couple hundred years ago. How do you think we got this out? Like a couple hundred years ago, somebody was in trade, made a ton of money, got land. Like, I don't, he's like, literally, this makes no sense as a sort of
Yeah.
classist.
He's pretty good to call Anne out on her shit, like,
He
her
is.
snobbery.
He is. But at the same time, I'm like, it tells you so much about the society. Or they're like, he does this for a living, but even though he's rich at it, it's low class. It's like,
Yeah,
but I'm
he's
like,
not
everyone
landowner.
needs a carpet. I'm like, that's like such a weird. I'm like, but also it's like a craftsman. It's like a handicraft. It's not like he, it'd be the sort of thing where it's like they talk about the distinctions between the house staff of the Lister servants and also servants in general, house staff and like outside staff. They're being classified, and I'm like, I would understand that if it was like, oh, he's a poor farmer or whatever. But it's like this is like a wealthy guy who's like out and about in society. Like that was such a bizarre distinction, but 19th century, what are you gonna do? It was all weird. It takes a dark turn. As a content warning heads up, we cut to Cordingly and Eugenie doing a task that is unclear. I don't know if they're putting something in fire. It's kind of like very much like a Law and Order when you go meet someone and it's unclear what the stage business was supposed to be. I'm not trying to make too light because the scene will actually get really dark, but I was like, is she putting something in the fire? They're just putting an object down. But then Cordingly notices Eugenie's crying. And she's like, something in broken French, like, what's wrong? And Eugenie breaks down and tells her that she's like, I've been bleeding a lot. I think I've lost or am in the process of like losing a baby. No, she's done because they talk about it when they were when they had traveled a bit. She was, and listeners like, oh, she seemed really pale and like distracted. So she has officially lost the baby. And she's like, I didn't even want it, but now it's gone. And I'm like, wow, that's like such a really complicated feeling. Cause like here she is, like now she's no longer in this like predicament situation, this very tenuous situation on, needing to be married and needing her boss not to put together the timeline. And then Cordingly is like very sweet and motherly with her. And is like, I was like, I lost 2 kids too, and then I lost my husband, and I worked for a while as Ann Lister's ladies' maid and like traveled with her, and then I broke my leg, and then have been here running this house ever since. And she seems like very not sad about it, but is very resigned, and she kind of is trying to comfort her and being like, this will pass to a certain, this pain will pass and you can have an okay life doing what you're doing. And then John comes in and kind of senses something's happening. And then Eugenie is just very much like, tell him the engagement's off, and like leaves. And I'm like, whoo, Eugenie. I was like, yo, I mean, I get you don't speak the same language, but it's the sort of thing where it's like, I don't know. It was obviously she's grieving and she's in a hard spot. But at the same time, I'm like, this guy was totally about to bail you out and definitely also has feelings for you. And she just very much was like, nope, this is over. This is done. This is canceled. So that was a hard scene.
Yeah, I felt bad for her in that scene, and I just really like her and Cordingly's relationship.
I do.
That's like one of my notes. I think they have really sweet, almost like mother-daughter type relationship. They're kind of thrown together.
I'm trying to think who in Downton I was always saying Mrs. Patmore and Daisy, because Daisy was also a shit show.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
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 That's closest type of relationship.
Yeah. One thing that we did kind of skip over in the previous scene where she's hanging out with her aunt Anne, where Walker's aunt Anne, that is where we find out Mrs. Ainsworth died. I can't believe we skipped that. That was like such a key thing. And she like collapsed. Yeah. And she is like shook because like, one, this is her friend. We will get into the big dramatic feelings there, but also the big dramatic history there with Mr. Ainsworth. But she is like so shook and so uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable. She's devastated, like beyond the loss of like a good friend who's supposed to come visit her in, I think, only a matter of months. And the next scene we get with the two of them, Ann Lister kind of thinks that she had feelings for Mrs. Ainsworth from how she the amount of her grief, like the how much she demonstrates it. And they're like, is that why you're taking her death? So she doesn't ask her outright, but very clearly she's like trying to piece that together. But one point that Anne Walker does make that is separate from her relationship with Mr. Ainsworth and from her friend is she's like, I feel like death follows me.
Yeah.
She says something to that effect. I was like, oh yeah, because her parents both died back to back. Her brother died. So many people, and now this is like her closest female companion, prior to Anne Lister coming into her life. And I'm like, oh wow, that is so hard. Also, the music,
Anything.
it really bothered me how dramatic the music was in this and how loud it was. Cause I was like, it felt like it was overplaying like a moment that was so solid in and of itself with Sophie Rundle's performance. And the writing was just was already so raw and so vulnerable. I felt like the dramatic music almost overplayed it into feeling like making it a little melodramatic. I'm like, no, but it is actually a really sad thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and I remember watching this scene originally, like in the first when I was watching the show like live, thinking like, "Oh, the title turn, there'll be a happy moment soon." It's just like it's kind of
No,
like the beginning like of angst for the next
no.
like what 4 episodes.
Yeah, up until mid episode 8, one could argue. Um, but then Ann Lister, who is a master of timing, is like, well, we need to throw off suspicion with your cousins and other people in town by being super social and prove that we have nothing to hide, which is right in strategy. And this has always worked for her in the past. We've been led to believe. But like she goes there and she's like trying to be amiable and social with Anne's family, and Anne is staring into the middle distance again and is like looking super melancholic. And I'm like, this is like such an awkward family. I'm like, it's so painfully awkward and it like so well done. But I'm like, this did not have the effect I think you intended it to have. I think she goes, well, that went well. And she was like, did it really? And like Anne Walker's like, did it really? And she's like, it went, well enough.
I do relate to Ann Lister here because like I'm somebody when I feel a conflict like I want to resolve like ASAP. So I am kind of like Ann Lister, like let's just get on with it and like get it over. Rand Walker's kind of like I just want to pretend like this stuff isn't happening right now. I've got like a lot of trauma stuff going on, which Anne doesn't realize at the time,
No,
and is
she
still kind
doesn't.
of learning and navigating Anne Walker's illness too at this time. So, but it is just like I relate to her. Like I have that same thing. Like if there's a conflict with somebody, I want to resolve like now, not later. And I'd
Yeah,
rather just go talk it to them like everything's fine.
Ann Lister doesn't believe in sitting through awkwardness or like tension with people. She's an Aries. She's an Aries. She wants it out in the open, directed, in as much as she can confront something. If she can't confront it verbally in a way that is combative, she needs to be aggressively nice. That aggression is channeled into politeness, extreme courtesy, kill him with kindness if you can't kill him, sort of thing, which is true Aries culture. Um, that said, speaking of conflict, although I will say, I will say to amend that, her relationship with her sister, where she isn't the one to apologize, but clearly still feels bad about that situation. Marion is the one who's eager to make up with her and who is like, she's like, I'm going into Halifax. And Marion's like, oh, I'm going to come too. I need to go, I don't know, buy some fabric to make underwear. And she's like, oh, I can make you some too. And Ann Lister's like, well, it'd be very helpful as I travel. Thank you. That's very thoughtful. Like it's so like robotic and she's so uncomfortable. And it's like, that's so interesting because like with everyone else, she's, fine to pick a fight and all that. But you see the way in which she cares about Marion, where it's like, she doesn't want, Marion is someone that for all their bickering and fighting, she does care, and so she doesn't like being in a sense of tension with her sister, which I thought was very, very sweet.
Yeah,
And
and you get
Marion,
like the Lister clan. We stand because they're allies. Because Ann Lister brings up wanting to have Ann Walker move in, and Marion's like, I'd be delighted if she moved in. I'd be happy to see you settled. And I'm like, we stand the Lister clan because they're allies. Because they clearly know like
yeah, they all say like, happy to see you settled, as if like
yeah,
she
even her
were,
dad, who's like has you could tell is kind of like I'd be very happy to see you settle. It's just kind of like they both don't know how to be like emotional with each other. And it's just kind of like,
No.
okay, moving on, but like, cool chat, cool chat.
No, but
Good talk.
it was so
Yeah.
wonderful to see literally to every single person say use almost exactly that turn of phrase. Almost as if she were like a eldest son who needs to is like it's time for you to settle down and get married. And at 40, if she were like in the way it was like if she were well, she is a daughter, but in like that sense where like if it were a daughter looking for heterosexual marriage, as we see with Marion, it is harder and it's not treated as like happy to see you settled. It's very much like, clock is ticking, you're only getting older sort of thing. Whereas for them, they treat Anne in the way of like a landowner who theoretically at this time, most of the time would have been a son. And they're like, I'm happy to see you settled, making plans, getting serious about your life sort of thing. Which was I thought was very like refreshing and very sweet to see an immediate family so embrace her so well and embrace her partner so immediately without question, like, oh, she seems nice enough, I like her, let's do it. But also Marion tries to the flip side of that tries to broach the subject of Mr. Abbott with her, and honestly Anne Lister is much nicer about it than the rest of their family is. She's very much like, you know what? If you can make a go of it, go for it. Whatever.
But she was like, what kind of big sister would I be if I didn't question the pedigree of a man who makes carpets? And then she just
Yes.
walks off.
And then Marion just like looks after her like, ugh. I will say we do get
Also, there's a really good deleted scene after Anne gets back from the coal pit and she's all dirty. She runs into Marion in Halifax, and Marion's like, what do you look like? And they're like, you look terrible. Why are you out like that? Because she's all dirty from the coal pit. And then, like, they say something to each other, and then Marion walks off and she steps in a pile of horse poop.
Oh, no. Oh, that's good. Oh, I'm sad.
You can probably find it on YouTube. It was in the BBC version.
Oh, that's worth watching. I will 100%
good.
watch that. Next thing happens, less bad Rawson, Jeremiah, I guess, but I like him as less bad Rawson, comes over and to try and go back and forth with the coal drama again, but accidentally reveals that his brother returned a gig he just ordered recently, and she pieces it together as being around the same time as the accident. But the one interesting thing he does say is like, you don't want to make enemies of my brother. You don't want to mess with my brother. And she's like, are you threatening me? And he's like, no. I'm warning you. Like, this is a man who knows what his brother is capable of and respects. I think he does have a respect for Anne Lister. Like, beyond knowing that he's doing the wrong thing and stealing her coal, I think he respects her to a certain degree as a businesswoman, and is trying to warn her off from what he knows Christopher Rawson could do.
Oh, also, I wanted to mention, I did, the coal math, the 226 pounds, 17 shillings, 6 pence.
Woo!
I went through that scene in the script and broke it down. I did the math. I think I mostly got her same answer. I think I got confused in the middle, but I went through and like figured out how much a shilling is and how many pence are in a pound and blah, 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 blah. I did the math. It was hard. It took me a minute.
Do you know?
Like 3 different units of currency.
Yeah, most of them are obsolete. Most of those units are no longer in use. My thing was like, do we know roughly what that correlates to in now money?
No? You'd have to adjust for inflation, but I think it'd probably be a few thousand an acre.
Ooh,
it's expensive.
Big bala. Going back to coal. So speaking of coal, we get a fun and upsetting look inside a coal mine in the 19th century.
Yeah, that was dark.
Yo, literally and metaphorically, that was so dark. It was like, yay, child labor, 12-hour shifts, but I will say it's equal opportunity because men and women work in the coal mine.
And he's like, it's like 12 men, 3 women, and like 6 kids, 6 boys. I think a couple of them are girls, and it's just like nobody cares. And I don't know if you realize this, Anne Lister like hit her head down there.
She does.
Where he's like, watch your head. Yeah, because I kept noticing she had like a cut on her head the rest of the episode.
Well, they're like, watch your head, mister. And I think a moment of pride, she's like, I'd rather be hit than be misgendered. And she just like kind of lets it happen a little bit. but yeah, I'm like, oh no, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. That cold, like also like I'm not the most claustrophobic, but I'm like, oh man, that was truly some like Oliver
Cold.
Twist
Do you know how
type
dangerous
stuff.
cold is today? Cold
Yeah,
today is extremely dangerous. How much more dangerous was it back then?
exponentially because also they didn't know about. I mean, the phrase "canary in a coal mine" literally was like they took birds down there to die of carbon monoxide poisoning first, so people would know to get out before they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. So this is what we're working from, team.
Yeah.
It's not great.
Yeah,
Um,
coal mining is still incredibly dangerous today, and it was even more so back then.
oh yeah, stay out of mines, kids, if you can help it.
Yeah.
Like speaking to literal children, do not play in coal mines. You will. That is not
Also,
a good
business
situation.
and when business, she goes to her lawyer, and in between the lawyer scene and the coal mine, that's where Marion steps in the poop. That's where that deleted scene goes. Anyway, businesswoman Anne is like my crush of the whole series. I like Ann
Mhm.
Lister, period. But like businesswoman Anne, she's so smart and so like I'm not gonna stand for this like male bullshit of like them stealing my coal.
Oh, she's over it. She's not here to play. She's like, I have goals. I'm trying to get a wife. I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
Um,
got about a very important scene because it's a good behind the scenes tidbit. So yeah, so about Anne Walker and her, she's in the bath getting cleaned up from the nasty coal, which is good if you have thirst for Saran Jones, the bathtub scene. But if you notice when Eugenie gives her the water to wash her hair, she raises her arms up, right?
yeah,
If you look closely, Saran Jones grew out her armpit hair for this role specifically, and that's like the only time you see it in the whole series.
that commitment, I could not.
Yeah, yeah. She said like I did that, like I was method. I wanted to live the life, and she grew out like her armpit hair, and I think maybe her leg hair too. And she said it was only in one shot, and that is the shot of the glorious armpit hair. Is the raising her hand over to like rinse her hair out is the tiny little shot of the armpit hair. That
Oh
is real,
wow.
100%,
No, I mean I
100%
believe it. I
real.
didn't think they were like handcrafting like armpit hairs to put in there
They do
like
that.
a wig.
They handcraft pubic hair for women on shows for like period dramas because
Oh
it's
yeah,
not realistic for
Merkins.
women to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. But I'm like armpit hair. But I'm like that's like a normally a historical detail that I wouldn't imagine unless the actor was super into it, like Saran was. That would not be a detail most people would think about.
yeah. I've read an interview where she like went method with that, and then she was like, "I'm not doing it again because I only ended up in one scene where you saw my armpits." She like
Yeah,
did
I
all
don't know why she grew her
that
leg hair out.
commitment
She
from
knew she
one
wasn't going
scene.
to show her legs at all.
I don't know if it was legs, but it was definitely arms because her legs look pretty flippin' smooth. Like when she's in her nightgown and stuff, that see through
Yeah.
it looks pretty smooth. But she grew out her armpit hair faux show. But she was like, "I'm not doing that again. That was pointless."
This is where things get well, I was gonna say get hairy, but on the, on the cusp of coming off of the armpit thing, I was like, no, I won't do it. And but then my brain did not give me any other adjectives. So the Anns are back together, and Walker won't show Ann Lister the letter, but she's like, he is all but proposing to marry me, and she's like, what are you like? His wife is like freshly dead, and she died in a traumatic way. I don't know if we touched on this. She was thrown from an open carriage, and I'm like,
Yeah,
that is an extremely graphic and upsetting way to die. And the fact that this man is within weeks not trying to cancel the trip that he had initially planned out that way is like immediately like so keen on it. And I'm like, that's crazy and
it's
should
gross.
raise flags. Also, he doesn't, it's not mentioned that they have kids or anything that the Ainsworths do. So it's not like he's in a hurry. He's like, I need someone to take care of like my, I don't know, 11 children. Who knows? So I'm like, how is this not raising flags for everyone else in her family? But yeah, so this is a really tense moment where Ann Lister is clearly getting super angry. She's like, and you can see it on her face where she's like, again, like another person is
Yeah,
leaving me for marriage. And but Anne is very clear that she's like, this is not a thing I want to do. I just feel obligated. But Anne is like trying to be compassionate with her because she knows she can't. Anne is not the one to like, you can't just blow up at her because she is so tender. And so
right.
she's so raw because of this, but also is very sensitive as a person. So she's like trying to like keep it in check and let her come to the conclusion on her own and be like, I mean, it's understandable. Like maybe, you could have kids, you could be a grandmother, and just live the life that women are all born to live anyway. You're doing what's expected of you. I can only be so mad at you about it. But Anne makes it super clear. She's like, I don't want to do this. I want to keep doing what we're doing. I want to be with you. The thing that got me, I wondered if historically the marriage offer was being overblown. It was like typically for any other class for someone who was not filthy freaking rich, like Anne Walker was, an offer of marriage would be a huge deal. You almost immediately say yes, as long as you don't loathe this person entirely. If they have any sort of standing, if they are ready and willing as a woman, you pretty much say, unless they are a class significantly below you. She has definitely more money than him. And also the fact that he has a profession at all. Like clergy was the most esteemed thing you could pretty much be, like not counting landed gentry or people who manage things of that nature or who worked in like politics or something like that. It was like being in the church was good and a big deal, but I'm like, you are working for a living. This is the most respectable job you can have, but it is a job. So I was like very curious about why it would be so expected from other people around her to like, well, it's an offer of marriage to a clergyman. And I'm like, well, he's not a noble. You know what I mean?
Well, no, he did. He did. It wasn't insinuated that he wanted to marry her because that whole note thing that comes later, it happened. Like the
No,
yes
no,
and
it
no
was. I wasn't disagreeing with that, but I was like, when people are like, this is an offer of marriage, it's not to be sneezed at. And I'm like, yeah, but it's by someone so many class steps below her. You know what I
Well, I guess
mean?
because it was a family friend, and he was like, I don't know, I don't know.
He is esteemed. No, and to be clear, like you have a certain amount of clout in the clergy, but I'm like, I
He
would
wasn't just
be
a normal preacher. Like he was gonna be like a.
a bit. Oh, he was up for bishop or close to it. He was working his way up to bishop. So I'm like, yeah, I guess that does track then because like that is such a high level of clout.
But I love the little speech Anne gives to Anne Lister about like, I'm in love with you. I want to be with you. I've loved you since I was like 18.
19,
Early that.
yeah.
She's like 14. Even the first time I saw you, I knew. And she's like, I've always felt this repugnance when thinking of forming a relationship with a man. And it's a
Mm,
really beautiful moment there. And Anne Lister does realize she does love her. She's in this kind of like conundrum that she can't quite understand yet, but she will come to understand pretty soon.
yeah, definitely. But she does throw down the gauntlet to her and is like, you have to make a choice now. We're not waiting 6 months. Before Mr. Ainsworth arrives and officially proposes, you have till Monday. And I was like, a note I wrote was like, nice to give her the weekend though, like a job offer.
Yeah.
But and listeners, and she's like, well, can we still be friends and like kind of keep doing, even if we can't like keep hooking up, can we still be? And listeners like, no, I'm not doing this Mariana stuff again. No, it was like, and then she does go home and she's going through it on her own and trying to like throw herself into her work and all the other things that we see her manage with her coal and stuff. But she does have a moment where she like shakes her fist to the heavens, like kind of at God, is like, don't you dare do this to me again.
Well, it's like she's writing about how she doesn't care. She's like, "I'm gonna take my time of waiting very quietly, and I'll be resigned either way, it doesn't matter." But as she's writing it, she's like, she's her collar's all undone and her hair's messy, she's, like, clearly upset, and then she stops, she's got ink all over her hand, and her hand's shaking, and then she feels like she's getting sick, and she goes and throws up, and then she, like, shakes her fist at God and is like, "Don't do this to me again," and that hit me because I've definitely been in that kind of situation where I've, like, have feelings for a girl and then I know it's not gonna work out, something comes out, I figure out they're straight or it's just not gonna work out, and I've had those exact moments. I mean, I haven't thrown up over it, but I have had that moment, like, God, like, "Please not again, like, I can't do it again," and I wrote down and I got emotional during this scene because, like, have similar feelings about things recently, as you know, so, um, I I got emotional and I was like but I wrote down, I was like, "I've been there," and then I said, in that prayer, I was like, retrospect, whether this scene was dramatized. I said it's a beautiful thing because like God heard her prayers because it was out and ultimately by the end of the season answered that she wasn't gonna have to go through it again. That it was gonna like end up kind of like okay in the end. So that scene got me, and that's also like probably one of my that's also my favorite frame from the episode is that whole scene.
Yeah, that was
That,
so it
that
was so
scene
powerful, but
got me good.
it is also a thing that you know, we're seeing her as someone who takes her faith extremely seriously. You know, which is it's so refreshing to see like a queer person with faith represented in TV. And I liked, and it like you see someone who takes it, you know, and obviously it's not the point of the show, but like for her, marriage is taking the sacrament together, right? And it's also this sort of like healthy spiritual interior life of feeling comfortable enough to like express anger to God. And that's a thing that like obviously if you've read, you know, those like deep cut sections of the Bible, like not even deep cut, like some of the like there are deep cut ones that have this, but like you think about like the Psalms and like parts of like Ecclesiastes and stuff like that, where it's just people being like, God, why? Why? Um, you know, and just being mad and like frustrated and yeah, Lamentations, like famously, it's in the name. Having this sort of freedom and honesty and in a level of intimacy where faith is being less of like you go to church, you do the thing, you pay your tithe, you go home, you know, sort of thing, and like not it being segmented out and not feeling the need to hide her heart and to hide her queerness from how she understood um, God and her faith. You know, it's a thing that she felt safe in expressing. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's like it's such an interesting thing to see because like I feel like so many times when we see people who like get like in a scene of like anger with God or the divine or whatever their spirituality is on TV and in like film and stuff, it's like a renunciation thing. You know what I mean? It's like I'm done sort of thing, or it's like how could you do this or sort of thing where it's like, whereas in this one it's just like an ongoing communication and it clearly a thing that she feels like she's communicated before.
Oh yeah, she's been in this situation before. That's why I related to it. I was like, this isn't the first time she's done this.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, and I loved it. It was nice to see something like that. I mean, as hard of a scene as it is to watch, it had a ring of authenticity to it that I very much appreciated, and I'm sure you did as well.
And then we cut to the straight up G that is Mrs. Robin.
I know it's such like a harsh about face in terms of tone, where OG baddie Mrs. Rawson just talks about being an Ann Lister stan. She's kind of like a ratch Lady Catherine de Bourgh. I don't know how to say the name from Pride and Prejudice. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, as they say it in certain TV adaptations, where she's like the HBIC. She is the oldest person in the room, if not the wealthiest, definitely the most powerful, the most connected, as we see. And she's like she runs the roost. You see the Rawson brothers and it's implied to be their two wives, correct?
Yeah, all the women are their wives. Like the one next to Jeremiah, his wife. The one next to Stansfield Rawson is Mrs. Stanfield's Rawson that we've met before. But Christopher, does he have somebody next to him, or am I just tripping? He was sitting by himself.
He's in by himself, but I feel like he does. Oh, maybe he's.
She wasn't there. She wasn't there.
Yeah. Oh no. She stepped out. She knew to stay away from this woman's wrath. But she's like, she's basically waxing poetic about how much she loves kicking it with Ann Lister. It's like she's so well traveled, she's so cultured, she's so interesting. It's like most women are dull and stupid, and does not, and like does not even apologize for that statement. And they cut the way the editing of the scene is so perfect. It like cuts to these two like glassy-eyed women who are just here, who don't say a word in the entire scene, and they just let this woman go. And I was like, oh, she's such a messy bitch, and I love her. She's the one to reveal the relationship between Ann Walker and her, right? So when the letter we were talking about, yeah, go ahead.
Because Eliza Priestley spilled the beans to her.
Yes, as we learned at the beginning of this episode, but also when we were trying to speculate on who wrote the letter last episode, I was like, it couldn't be it couldn't be any of the Rawson brothers because this is the scene where they learn about that relationship. And it goes, and they're like, yeah, she's trying to sink her own pits. Oh no, basically she knows all the cold tea too. So she's like, oh, I heard she's trying to sink her own pits. And they're like, yeah, it's super expensive. Where's she going to get the money to do that? And she goes, perhaps her little friend will help her. She's plenty of money. And they're like, who? And they're like, Ann Walker, your cousin. It's so good. And I'm like, oh wow, the brothers look so shook, and they like did not at all see this coming. And then OG baddie Mrs. Rawson, who is nobody's fool, not for a second, goes, Miss Walker will let Miss Lister dip into her purse, whatever else she's been letting her dip into. And then she pauses and goes, so sorry, ladies. The so sorry, ladies is the perfect cap to that scene.
Well, because she's echoing what her son just said about, like, saying, telling Endless where she can stick it or something. And he apologizes to the ladies.
So
and then she
good.
just echoes them. Oh, I love her.
So good. Then we cut back to Ann Lister talking to John about Eugenie, and he's like, so you're married to Eugenie?
Because she like, he gives her that beer and she just chugs it. I was like, a woman after my own heart.
Same. She knocks it back. It's been a day. Look, Ann has had a day. Ann Lister is talking to John about Eugenie, and he's like, oh, you're engaged. He's like, that's over now. Don't worry about it. And she's like, what? And it's like, oh, was she pregnant? And he's like, not about to lose his bag behind nobody. He's like, it wasn't mine. He's like, it must have been George. I suspected something. They were real cozy together. And then she was really like sickly for a long time. And she's like she's not even mad about the pregnancy. She's mad that like Cordingley knew, all these other servants knew, that they all had this big secret behind her back. But then, she and John have a very nice moment where she's basically like, you're way better than her. Like, stay out of that mess. And she's not wrong.
Then he asks, like, are you all right? And she's like, and her perfect big bitch energy was like, I'm always all right, which is a line that she'll use a lot over the next few episodes.
Yeah. Oh. So Bad Dad Sowden's lease is terminated, but Lil Sowden gets his own 6-month lease. Lil Sowden and Susanna have kind of love at first sight. Who cares? Not me all that much.
I wrote because, his mom couldn't read the letter, and I was like, remember when poor people couldn't read? Because it's just like you don't think about you when you're seeing. Probably nobody in that house could actually read anything. Maybe Lil Sowden could, but that's probably better.
I think Lil Sowden could. Well, definitely the kid who only has one leg now can totally read that. Never mind. That's a spoiler. He does get education later, so he'll be able to read at some point. I don't think he can't read now. Speaking of reading, we also get the engagement raffle from hell, where Ann Lister.
I wrote two things. I wrote two things in my notes. They need to retitle this episode Lesbian Angst. Number 2, I wrote in all capital letters in that basket. Shut up. I was like, bitch, what was she thinking with that fruit basket?
It's an edible arrangement. Oh, man, the engagement raffle from hell sends this full basket over, and a letter being like, oh, I couldn't. He's like, I'm so tormented, I'm sure. It was just like such an angsty letter. And then she's like, pull out one of these, whatever you pull out first, our fate is decided, because I couldn't decide. And Ann Lister pulls out a no at first, and she like kind of breathes a sigh of relief. But then she goes, wait a minute. And she checks, because I feel like in her mind, she's like, maybe this is a romantic gesture where she put 2 no's in. But then she actually pulls out a yes, and she is livid. As she should be, because she's literally like, I'm not leaving this to a game. She's like, I can't actually believe she would leave this to a game, to a matter of chance. She
told her in the next scene, she's like, I'm not going to let my fate be decided by a piece of paper.
Oh, exactly. And so I'm like, I think 100% opens it, trying to see if it is supposed to be some sort of gesture. And then she looks so disappointed when it is actually a yes. So Anne angry storms across these like fields, in this beautiful, like late afternoon, like very, very early golden hour, like pre-golden hour, light. And this is my favorite frame of the episode. Spoiler alert. her walking through those fields and scowling. But Anne Lister confronts Anne about this. And Walker basically collapses under the weight of her secret and shares why she feels obligated to marry Mr. Ainsworth. What turns out is
something's up because Anne looks. I mean, I walked when she comes. She like kind of slides through that door like a dog that did something wrong. Like she like pops around that door, and I was like,
"Oh,
Anne
she knew
like
that was dog. She was about to get it for that."
Yeah.
But something we didn't touch on in a previous scene. They're in bed together, and then Walker tells her like she was always much older than her husband, and so she always joked about like, "Oh, Anne Walker, you'll take care of my husband after I'm gone, right?" And so that was the thing. She's like, I always thought it was supposed to be a joke, but he seemed to take it really serious. And she basically confides in this moment, like, I feel like I must marry him. I feel duty bound. And then Anne Lister's like, what do you mean? Like, to your family, what? And so basically she's like, if I tell you this, you're never going to look at me the same way. You're going to be so disgusted with me, whatever. And she's like, no, just tell me what it is. Like, just tell me. And so basically she says, I've, been indiscreet with him. And she's like, not getting what it means at first. She's like, and this is where we're getting into the more content warning section of things, where basically she would come over there to spend time with her friend. If her friend would leave the room, he would make advances on her. He would kiss her. He would touch her inappropriately. We're led to believe groping of some sort. And then Anne Lister's like, have you ever been connected? And she goes, yes, once. And she's like, I'm so ashamed. And I'm like, I think, and also this is someone who's like been led to believe like you only sleep with your spouse. And like it's a sin, but also not socially acceptable. And that a woman is tainted or ruined if she does it outside the bounds of marriage. Like being married a second time is like fine. Like if your husband dies, whatever, or I guess that would be the only thing. If your husband dies, that is the only acceptable way for you not to be a virgin when you are married. Or conversely, or like maybe there's like a little wiggle room if like you have sex with someone before marriage, but you marry that person. So she's so ashamed and so concerned that Anne will immediately reject her and think that she's, damaged in such a way or been, untrue to her or something. And I'm like, honestly, this on a second watch, I was like, oh, this would be a thing that would derail a heterosexual relationship in this time period, potentially. Like if you ever read like Tess d'Aubervilles, I don't know how to say that name. I've only ever read it, but it's like a lot of other things of this period, the trope of the fallen woman, of like someone who either is tempted into premarital sex or who is assaulted. The result is the same. Like you are deemed not quite fit to marry. And this continues for like 100 years, about 100 some odd years after this. Remember, like Mary in Downton Abbey, that's a big deal that she's not a virgin before. And luckily, Matthew, R.I.P., was cool with it and was like, whatever. Doesn't matter to me. I love you. But in this one, she's like, and Anne Lister immediately is like at her side in a moment being like, you were preyed upon. This man, like you were under his protection in his home. And she's like, oh, but I was, and she does have, a lot of assault survivors describe a type of guilt. It's like, oh, I was in, the wrong place at the wrong time, or I put myself in the situation. She's like, no, you didn't. You were there to visit your friend and he preyed on you. He was the married one. You were the one saying no and not wanting to, betray your friend or even just wanting to be with him generally, like regardless of what her friend was doing. So I'm like, she immediately has that sort of empathy for her that like, quite frankly, not to say that every man of this time period would not have felt some kind of way about it, but like that would be a huge deal breaker in this time period.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so and also Anne Walker has like additionally on top of that, she's like, I couldn't tell anyone because he said if I told anyone, it would reflect as poorly on me as it would on him, which is not true 100% because he's the married clergyman who was seducing this much younger woman, not even seducing, who, even if he framed it as a seduction, still, that's not great. And this is definitely not what she was describing. She's describing coercion, if not assault, throughout. So it's the sort of thing where it's like,
Yeah.
he's telling her these lies, and, you know, because sexuality was not a thing that was discussed, even in the most pure context of like, you've been married a million years, you're in love, whatever, it was still not discussed. This was a thing women learned about on their wedding night from their mothers. And that's about it. A woman of this class, I should say. And so Anne says at the tail end of that scene, you know, I would have helped you out regardless of how you would have answered me, which, you know, is the best thing she could have possibly said to her. And Anne Lister cradles Anne Walker as she's like crying into her shoulder, and she's like, you know, what am I going to do? What are you going to do to him? And she like, and Anne Lister like kind of all but looks into the camera. Oh, she does look into the camera. She looks into the camera, and the camera pulls back, and she goes, I haven't decided yet. And that's such an amazing note to end on, like kind of like this avenging angel. I loved it.
I wrote in my notes, I was like, she's going to kill him. That's what I mean, that's not what happened, but that's like, and that when I saw that, I was like, I really wanted her to. It's that like kind of like big butch energy too of like you want to protect your partner. It's like somebody even thinks about hurting them. You're like, okay, you're dead now. They're gonna die. What's the worst thing I could possibly do to them to make them pay for like what they've done? I loved that look to the camera. I remember seeing that when I watched it. I was like, slow clap. That was amazing.
It was, and it was so and it was like not even like, oh, we'll figure it out together, you know, whatever. It's like, I haven't decided yet. She's like, I've got you, babe. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. That was such a shivers. So quote of the episode, that was close. That was going to be on my list of quotes of the episode, but I wound up picking two. OG Batty Rawson, the Miss Walker will let Miss Lister dip into her purse, whatever else she's been letting her dip into. So sorry, ladies. Fantastic. Perfect delivery. Followed by my next favorite, Anne Lister's, when she's giving Anne Walker the ultimatum. It's like, we have to know what we're doing. I have to know what I'm doing, which is such a mood that I've been in. It's like when you are putting your heart out there for someone, just very much having to be like, look, you know, it takes two, or the sort of thing is like, you have the control in this particular situation. I'm the one being vulnerable, but you have to tell me where we're at so that I can move on and go about my business. And I'm like, that was the thing. That's a very, you know, that's a relatable thing, in the sense of like when I, you know, tell when I went out on a limb and like express feelings to someone, it's like, okay, you know, I understand you have the power to reject me or accept me here, but you have to tell me I don't want to live in limbo a moment longer than I have to, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Trying to think, what was my favorite? I mean, it's also in line with my favorite frame. I just think it's like that subtext from the line where she's writing in her journal, which it's been argued that that line in her journal, she really probably maybe didn't care at this point about Anne Walker, maybe in real life, but in the show they're playing it that she does. But that whole like subtext of like her saying this one thing in her journal, but obviously it's having a different effect on her. I really like that where she's saying, you know, I'll take my time of waiting very patiently and be resigned either way, but she's obviously clearly having like a reaction to it.
Yeah. She always tried to downplay her own feelings and be like, oh, this other person out here feeling all these things, who cares? And I'm like, no, you feel a lot. You're a fire sign. That's who you are.
Masculinity too. Cameron Esposito talked a lot about that in her recaps, like related to Anne's like hard emotional exterior, which is like a definitely a quality in butch women because that's just how we kind of face the world. So that I found really relatable. And then that also leads to my favorite frame, which is that scene as well. My favorite frame and my favorite quote are all in the same scene.
So the Anne cradling Anne, I haven't decided yet. That's one of my favorite frames, as well as her washing her face. Just the way the light, that white morning light hits her, and like hits like and kind of halos her hair, and it gives her a bit of a silhouette is so striking in that scene. I love it so much.
I mean, you can see everything. That
Yeah.
nightgown was pretty sheer.
Well, it's like not even that, but it was just like the way it's just like such a stark, and especially for a show that's normally so colorful, to have something that was so
Mhm.
washed out and so gray, which in this one gray area of time where she's not sure if she's gonna have a wife or not, but also just lacking color, and lacking the joy that she had, a few days ago, when they were sitting in that room and everything was so bright and saturated. um I will say favorite prop of the episode was the pocket watch when they're in bed and being adorable uh, in their like night shifts and just teasing each other. It's very cute. And the pocket watch, which comes into play, which I love in the final scene, the like little bit that they have with the watch. So I love seeing it throughout the series as a thing that like Ann Walker loves to like take away from Ann Lister.
I like see my favorite costume, the red dress. I
Mm,
usually don't pull much, I'm not don't really have feminine taste, but I love that red dress. It's the brightest like and red's kind of like a sexy, passionate color too, and then just Anne's having this like sexual awakening and just this like passionate affair with Ann Lister, and that dress really reflects that and kind of like her mood for that scene.
I like it.
So that wraps up episode 4 for us. Yeah, and next week we have to deal with the real pain in the butt that is Miss Parkhill, Anne's friend that comes to visit, who, ooh girl, I don't like very much. We get into more like people that just mind their own business. But episode 5 is a little painful. Episode 5, there's some lines in episode 5 that broke me. So it's gonna be, I'm really looking forward to kind of breaking apart this episode because it had like a serious effect on me. Some of the lines in it, so I'm looking forward to it. Reverend Ainsworth comes to town. We have to deal with him.
Ugh, he sucks. He sucks so
He
much.
sucks.
He's literally the worst. But yeah, so I think we should wrap it up. This was a heavy one, you guys. The next one will be a heavy one as well. 6, also pretty heavy. 7 starts we slowly, we get some whimsy. 7, yeah, she's going to Europe. Some whimsy, some fun.
That's a little whimsy.
Just a
8's
little,
fun
not
too.
not much.
But yeah, we will be back next week. This time next week for a brand new podcast. So in the meantime, make sure you're following us both on social media. I can be found on Facebook, the Twitters, and the Instagrams at the Kelsey P. Jones.
You can find me on Twitter at _ I am living color, and on Instagram at I am living color.
Cool. We will see you guys next week. Bye.
Diggy.
I want to thank you guys again for listening to this week's podcast. Follow us online at Jack the Last Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. And check us out online at jackthelastpodcast.com. Jack the Last the Podcast is That Hipster Kid production, produced, edited, and narrated by Kelsey P. Jones.
And Carrie Kears.
Music is by Epidemic Sound.